Good evening and welcome to the October 12th, 2021 business meeting. If we all please could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board is joined by 7 of its members: our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Timothy Harney; our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Ted Fulton; our Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operation, Mr. Luis Frontero; our District Legal Counsel, Mr. Christopher Clayton; our District Clerk, Ms. Suzanne Bonetti; and our Student Rep, Ms. Grace Witt. As always, there are 2 opportunities for the community to participate during the Board of Ed meeting. The first is just before the board takes up its agenda, and the second follows the disposition of all agenda items. If you'd like to speak, we ask that you come to the podium in the back of the room. You must be a resident of the school district. If you are not a resident, you must be voted by a majority vote of the Board of Ed. We ask that you keep these comments to approximately 3 minutes. For the convenience of the community, all Bayport Blue Point Board of Education meetings are taped and live streamed and posted thereafter to the school district website. And as always, if you'd like to follow Dr. Harney, you can follow Dr. Harney at BBP Schools. And you can follow, the school district at BBP Schools and Dr. Harney at BBP Soup. Before we get into the community renewal business, we just have a short statement we'd like to read prior to the start of the board meeting. Before we begin our regular board meeting agenda, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the great sadness that has blanketed our towns over the past several weeks, as our district collectively mourned the losses of members of the BBP school community. While these past few weeks have brought unimaginable grief, we are thankful for the ways in which our school community has rallied to support one another. These actions have been a testament to what we have long known as BBP's tradition of being a tight-knit community, one that rises to support each other during our darkest days and cheer for one another during moments of triumph. As we work together to continue to process these recent events, please be assured that this level of support and aid will remain available from our district to anyone in need. Together, we are one BBP and one school family. In closing, I ask that we share in a moment of silence and to honor the lives lost, and ask that we keep their families and friends in our thoughts, but more importantly, in our prayers. Thank you so much. At this time, going to open communication. We would open it up to any community members for any new or old business. Not hearing anything, we'll turn it over to our superintendent. Dr. Harney, how are you tonight, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Welcome to everybody tonight. I would like to echo Mr. Miller's sentiments tonight. Obviously, the last month has been very difficult for the BBP community. And obviously, our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families. I'd like to thank the staff for everything that they've been doing. The one thing I've always talked about with Bayport Blue Point, people are always willing to step up and help each other out. And you never saw it. You saw that so much in the past month. And it just continuously amazes me when, when we're faced with anything as a community, people continue to rise to the occasion. So I really want to thank everybody for all that they've done, even to reach out, just to even check on to see how we're doing. So I appreciate that more than you'll ever know. So thank you to everybody. And as I said before, our thoughts and prayers are with our families. And I know Mrs. Witt's going to speak about a little bit about something that the school's been doing, so I'm going to leave that to her, so I'll leave that up. So really just to kind of follow up on some things. This week is Spirit Week, and we have homecoming, which is very nice. So obviously it's been great to have all the students back and in clubs and enjoying the sports, after school sports. So that's been happening on a regular basis. So this week we have homecoming. The parade is earlier this year. I'm blanking out, 10:30, correct? Yep, 10:30. The parade will be this year. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody there. And then the game will be at 1 o'clock. We also have the Hall of Fame the breakfast will be earlier in the morning. I believe that's at 9 a.m. So that will be some of the festivities that will be on for Saturday. And then throughout the week, there are different themes within the schools. I know tomorrow, for example, is Red, White, and Blue Day at the high school, and I believe on Friday for all the schools is to wear the school colors. So we're looking forward to doing that. So that's kind of what's taking place this week. Just kind of an update on COVID testing, which I had mentioned the last time. Since the last time we spoke, the school has started to do COVID testing for staff. Overall, it's gone very well. Some districts are just starting now. We are going into our 4th time doing it. So I'd just like to thank everybody for all their help with that. So that's been going well. And one of the things I had talked about that came down to us that we will have to do at some point, and it'll probably be either next week or the week after, we'll offer an afternoon for families if they wanted to get some testing done. That will be available to them. It'll probably be a Tuesday or Wednesday. It will not be done in school. We'll use the auditorium right here. So if a parent wanted to bring their child by, that's how they would do the consent. It's not us bringing students there. So they would bring them to there, and then they could get them tested if they wanted to get them tested. Or if somebody was out on possibly not feeling well or quarantine, that's an opportunity that we'll be doing here as well. It'll be one afternoon a week that we'll be doing that. That was something that we also had to do based on the most recent guidance that had come out on that September 2nd. So that's kind of that. With that, I'll say I'm going to do a presentation a little bit, so I'll hold that for a second, and I'll talk about the transportation study, then we'll talk about that in a little while as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. At this time, we would turn it to Ms. Witt, our student delegate, for her monthly report.
There was a college fair last week that had a bunch of really great schools that let juniors begin to explore their future and seniors continue their search. This week is Spirit Week, which is very exciting, and we also have homecoming this weekend, which everyone is looking forward to. Tomorrow, the juniors and sophomores will be taking the PSAT and the PACT. This past month, we had a truly unfortunate loss, and a lot of students had a hard time with it because it was very upsetting and heartbreaking. I actually met with Mr. Haas to discuss what we could do to recognize Chris. He informed me that there would be a moment of silence, and I suggested a day where we would all wear the color red because it was his favorite color. Word was spread by the students on social media, and we were overwhelmed with the response and so happy to see that 90% of the students were wearing red in his honor. It even spread to the middle school and elementary schools, which was not intended, but emphasized the love and support that the students wanted to show for the family.
Thank you so much for doing that, Ms. Witt. Appreciate it. Any questions for Ms. Witt? Not hearing any, we will turn it back over to Dr. Harney for the recognition of our Teacher of the Year award.
So I'm happy to share with you, as you know, over the course of the year, I get the opportunity to recognize the Teachers of the Month. And at this point this year, we get to recognize the Teacher of the Year for the 2020-21 school year. With us, we have Miss Karen Hicks, who's sitting in the back. If you could just stand up for us and raise your hand, or like to do whatever. I am gonna bring you down here in a second, but I would like to just read to you what was written about Karen that we shared. We actually did a recognition as well from a district standpoint on superintendent's on opening day for when we had our first superintendent's conference day. So we were able to recognize her at that point, and she shared with us some of her words of wisdom. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Karen. Our Teacher of the Month. So she was the Teacher of the Month for May 2021, but as I said, she was also recognized as the Teacher of the Year. Our Teacher of the Month for May is truly deserving of this honor and recognition. This teacher is dedicated, hardworking, always helpful, highly knowledgeable, and focused on improving all aspects of education here at Bayport Blue Point School District. She's a fixture of the James Wilson Young Middle School, and during her nearly 30 years at the building has become a go-to person for students, colleagues, and administrators alike. She's always there to listen, offer support, or do something to bring a smile to the face of a colleague or a student. She has always been an advocate for what is best for the kids, over the last 15 months, she's demonstrated this by devoting her time to the committees for reopening and trying to figure out how to teach in a COVID world so kids can feel successful, good about themselves, and continue to learn. In her classroom, she pushes her students and works endlessly to ensure they are successful as they can be, as successful as they can be. She seeks out ways to connect with her students on a personal level, and anyone can immediately sense the comfort her students feel with her. The entire middle school math department has been mentored by this teacher, either formally or informally, due to her tireless dedication that all students have the best possible instruction, even if they aren't her own. Over the years, she has been the advisor for the National Junior High Society math department teacher in charge, instructional council member, school improvement team member, a union representative, has volunteered for numerous committees, and for the last 10 years has been the BBPTA vice president for the middle school. Her commitment to her students, the staff, and BBP community are not easily matched. This person works tirelessly advocating for colleagues and students to ensure everyone has the opportunity to do their very best every single day. This teacher is the utmost professional and a master teacher. She's highly respected by administration, colleagues, and community members, and students. I can echo this. I'd like to thank Ms. Hicks personally, because we met almost on a bi-weekly basis last week, as she was very involved as we continuously talked about how to bring more students back to school, as we were kind of focusing in on trying to bring more students back in over the course of the year. She was one of those teachers who met with us on a regular basis, and her input was invaluable. So I want to thank you for that, Karen. And also just being there for everybody. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So saying that, there's a great pleasure and pride that we recognize the Bayport Blue Point Teacher of the Year, Ms. Karen Hicks. If you'd come on down here, we have something for you. Yeah, if you can do that.
Ms. Hicks, if you could come back down, we would, Dr.
Do
Har-
one more picture, Ms. Hicks.
Ms. Hicks, if we can come back down and get one more picture with you with Dr. Harney. Would you mind coming back down so you can get a picture with Dr. Harney?
All right.
Sorry. Share it with your husband. Hopefully he can try to strive for what you already got. Tell him I said that. Congrats one more time. At this time, we'll turn it over to Dr. Harney, who will kind of set the stage for a child safety zone for the study and for the presentation. We have two presenters here tonight. Dr. Harney?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So we're going to kind of do this in two parts. So if you remember last year, it was probably in the spring at some point, the Board of Education had asked us to pursue or to redo a transportation study. And at that point, we were given certain guidance or guidelines, I would say, as to what we were looking at. So with that, I met with Mr. Cordes, who oversees our transportation department, and we partnered with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. Tonight we have Joe Lesnick is with us from Eastern Suffolk BOCES. So really what we're going to do is we have a presentation for you tonight. This is really just the beginning of a discussion. And then what we did is we had Mr. Cordes put a piece in there. So I'm going to talk about these in two separate parts. So really, the original presentation that Mr. Lesnick put together, he has done a full report for us, which after this will go onto the website so that everyone will be able to see it. As always, we'd like to present it to the Board of Education first when we're looking at this. So this will be the first time they are hearing it as well. And then after that, we're going to do a quick follow-up with Mr. Cordes, who will go through parts of his. Tonight, as I said, really is only the beginning of the conversation. And Mr. Lesnick will kind of walk us through the process and what he was looking at as he kind of took a look at our community and the transportation. So with that, I'm going to invite Mr. Lesnick up front. And I want to thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Hello, now I hear. Thank you, Dr. Herney, and thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to present our findings. Just go through this as quickly as I can. Child Safety Zone was conducted by BOCES back in May or June of this year. What is the Child Safety Zone? Child Safety Zone. Oh. It's the mask. It's the mask. A Child Safety Zone is a study to see how safe a district is for transportation. We're going to talk tonight about the results that we used to study this educational law for Child Safety Zone and the analysis and the interpretation of our results and recommendations for what the next step is for your district. Child Safety Zone evaluates road conditions encountered by students walking to and from school. It determines whether a Child Safety Zone exists in the district. New York State law defines a child safety zone. That's a definition. You can read it. It's boring. You have a child who lives in the district. A child walks to and from school. A child encounters a hazard going to and from school. That's the basic. There are three types of safety hazards we look at when we're doing a safety zone. They are highways without sidewalks or adequate shoulders, highway intersections, and highway railroad grade crossings. And when I first met with Dr. Herney, he said, "Oh my God, we have all three of those." And he's absolutely right. The final step from our perspective is that the Board of Education or the trustees and the voters of the district must authorize a child safety zone. We were chartered to look at how safe walkers are in your district. We picked 12 addresses randomly from within your district. We chose students mostly who were not currently getting transportation, and students who were being transported, just to keep an honest eye about what was being presented in the district. We looked at if you look at one student from one address, it's not just that one student that may or may not qualify for transportation, it's all the students in the adjoining areas, the adjoining neighborhoods. Because if one child has to encounter hazards, everyone in that neighborhood is going to encounter similar hazards. The study reviewed the routes children take walking to school. We selected 12 addresses, and again, we found that several of them were without sidewalks or without adequate shoulders. Again, going back to New York State education law, state ed defines a shoulder as a portion of a highway contiguous with the roadway, a flat area between the edge of the road, a shoulder that's 5 feet wide. A shoulder is visible if by means of pavement marking or delineation, or if the pavement seams or joints make it appear that a shoulder is present. We focused initially on Gillette Maple Avenue as other residential, as we focused on those, we found that there were several residential streets in your district that do not have adequate shoulders or sidewalks. These are examples of shoulders and sidewalks. If you look at the left picture, that's Middle Road. It's a good shoulder because it has a white delineation. It's a hazard for child because there's a car blocking the shoulder. So a child would have to walk around it. Gillette Avenue had another good shoulder. It's delineated by a different pavement type. However, where I was standing taking the picture, it's not a good shoulder. These are some examples of what a shoulder looks like in your district. You can see the different streets that we've looked at, and we have a 5-foot yardstick measuring what a shoulder should be. So you can see you have residents who put their fences right up to the street lines. You have residents who put retaining walls or shrubbery and flowers right up to the street, which doesn't make for a safe shoulder. There's a picture of Gillette Avenue at a railroad crossing. No sidewalk, no shoulder, which is very dangerous. You can read the signs. Bottom left, you have a overnight parking in front of a residence. So if a child's walking up that street, they have to walk around the cars. My favorite is the bottom right. beautiful landscaping and a fence right up to the street. The second hazard we look at are highway intersections. Intersections look at the volume of traffic, and we look at that for a 15-minute period to determine what the volume is. These were the busiest roads in Bayport Blue Point based on the volume of traffic. And New York State Ed has three categories, three levels of points. The lowest point is anything less than 50 vehicles in a 15-minute average. The second highest level of points is awarded to 75 to 50 to 100 vehicles, and then the third highest level is 100. So you can see by far your district has a significant amount of volume of traffic. And you can see that some areas, like Snedeker Avenue, 228 vehicles in the morning AM rush. After school start time, it drops to 28. You can see that Railroad Avenue varies about where along the avenue you're measuring the traffic. The left map is a map of the high volume streets. The yellow highlighted streets are those with over 100 vehicles per 15 minutes. The green are roads with vehicles between 50 and 100. And obviously the pink are the schools that you have. The right side map is the addresses that we chose for our study. Some of the addresses, we worked with Brian to get some addresses that you were transporting to different schools. Some we just picked randomly based on your tax base. And you can see the upper right-hand corner, there's one way out of what would be your district, but it is still within your district. We wanted to look at all potential addresses. The third hazard we look at are railroad grade crossings. The volume of trains that you encounter when walking to and from school can be a hazard. You have to look at the AM and the PM times and count how many trains are crossing. That includes freight trains, which really don't travel much during the morning rush hour. There are some in the afternoons, and some deadhead trains. A hazard exists. The maximum point you get for trains is 3 trains within an hour. Your district has 10. So you get the maximum points for crossing a railroad grade. So as Dr. Herney pointed out, your district has all 3. The problems are you have students walking a length of distance along roads without shoulders or a sidewalk. You have a high volume of traffic on a 4-lane highway, Nichols Road, 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, 444 vehicles in a 15-minute period of time. Even though you minimize the potential hazards with a crossing guard, which is a great effort, you still get the maximum points because of the volume, the number of lanes. It's just too hazardous of a condition. You also have a 2-lane highway, Montauk Highway, which goes through the middle of your district. The speed limit's 40 miles an hour. You minimize the hazard by having crossing guards at major intersections throughout Montauk Highway, which is a great endeavor. You still got a lot of points, but not the maximum points for that. There were also several residential street crossings with no more than one-sided stop sign. So students are walking along somewhat hazardous roads. And again, you have one track, but it has many morning and afternoon trains. When you look at the hazards and the points that are awarded, crossing a multi-lane highway at 55 miles an hour, Nichols Road, is the #1 hazard and was awarded the most points. Railroad grade crossings, the more trains pass, the more points that are awarded. The walking along a stretch of road without a shoulder or sidewalk, again, the longer the distance, the greater the points. And walking through Montauk Highway, even with crossing guards, if a child is walking along that with the volume of traffic or crossing it at an unattended crossing, there are some points concerned. This is a chart that summarizes our findings. The left side of the 12 addresses that we picked. If you go from the left to the right, it just gives you the mileage from home to school. That's the shortest driving distance from that child's house at that address to the front door of the school that they would be attending. You have those, either a W is someone who is assigned to be a walker from, say, 34 Wyland Road. That child is attending Blue Point Elementary School and is considered a walker. That's because their distance is 1.2 miles. Your distance is 1.23 miles. So anyone less than 1.23 miles is going to be assigned a walker and not provided transportation. If you continue with that same student, if they went to the middle school, if they went to the high school, theoretically, and you look at the points, that child's address would be awarded 23 points as a single hazard, which means they would qualify for transportation as a child safety zone. If you look at the numbers above the 23, the single hazard 12 or 15 delineates the difference between the maximum points for a K through 8th grader, 15 points being the maximum for an 8th grader through 12th grader. You can have a lesser hazard, but when you compare lesser hazards, you combine the points and you have a greater total. 2 columns over, there's a combined hazard for 21, 27 points. Again, the 21 is for the combined hazard for the younger grades, 27 for the older grades. When you look at those points, every address that we looked at qualified for a child safety zone up through 12th grade except for 415 Lakeview Avenue. But it still is a safety issue for younger students. What we concluded is we picked 12 addresses. We've identified 10 new safety zones for children walking to school. 2 children's safety zones were reconfirmed for students who are currently receiving transportation that should continue to receive transportation. It's recommended that transportation be provided for all students of all grades who walk to school in 9 of the 10 indicated child safety zones and the 1 for the 8th graders. The next step, according to New York State Ed, it requires certification by your superintendent. It requires, a child safety zone is not required by law, but a Board of Education has complete discretion as to whether or not you want to award it a child safety zone. Voter approval is required. Matter of fact, board approval is required before voter approval is required. That's it. Any questions? I tried to get through that as quickly as possible because I know Brian has a lot more information that you'd be interested in.
Thank you so much. Any questions from trustees before Mr. Cortez goes?
Well,
Ms. Byrne?
just a comment. Thank you so much. It was kind of a shock to see 10 zones. Several years ago, we had a study done of a small area. And this is really a wake-up call, and it's concerning how unsafe the roads are according to your expertise.
I'm sorry, I missed the point of the question.
Oh, well, I'm just making a statement,
Okay.
really.
Thank you.
That it's concerning. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Any other trustees before Mr. Cortez goes? Mr. Cortez?
Joe, I just have one question for you as you're doing this.
Sure.
Is, in terms of just so that the Board of Education has an understanding, is there any way or any mitigating factors that could be used where those would not be a child safety zone?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good, very good question. So there are 3 hazards that were really, identified as safety zones. One of them is the volume of traffic. And again, Nichols Road has a high volume of traffic. Maybe you consider either putting a bridge over the roadway, which would minimize it. You do have a stoplight. You do have a crossing guard there now, which mitigates the situation very well. But again, the volume of traffic and the number of lanes of traffic is a hazard. I observed the intersection several times, and it was amazing. Even though you have a police officer there, pushing the hazard button for children to cross, traffic is chomping at the bit to get across there. I saw people trying to go through red lights with a police officer standing there. That's a hard one to get out of. One thing you could certainly do is to increase the number of shoulders or sidewalks that you have in the district. To me, that's something that maybe the town should be considered in zoning. I know I'm a resident of Hopog, in the town of Smithtown. We have easements on our property. We can't do certain things so many feet away from the street. So we have town sidewalks. We have town trees. We can't touch those. Your residents don't seem to either have that zoning or adhere to it. I'm not sure which. That's one thing I would start to look at. The other thing possibly is you have 1 high school and 1 middle school. I think the zoning for elementary schools are good with 3 different elementary schools in 3 different areas. But just 1 high school, 1 middle school is difficult because you've got people from a small district having to cross major hazards. I'm not sure how to mitigate that other than having additional buildings, which could be a hazard, could be an expensive proposition. Any other questions? And I'm not sure you could do anything about the railroad crossings.
No, another question, but I just want to kind of reflect upon, I've been asking to do this again for a couple of years now. We did something not to this scope or range a few years ago, and before I was on the board, and nothing really ever came to it. I don't think they ever came up with whether or not it was a draft or a final, and I just can't see how Nichols Road is not one of the most unsafe places for kids to cross. I'm glad this looks like a great job you guys did, and I've got to read the in-depth report, and so this was definitely a good high-level view. And I'm glad we did open the scope to look at all other areas besides that corridor. But looking at this, it's, if you ask for it or if you build it, they'll come. It looks like a lot to kind of dig your teeth into and how to resolve that. So that becomes, I'm happy to see it and identify the issues, but then it becomes, well, how do we overcome all these different things? Not just Nichols Road, but now Montauk Highway, railroad tracks.
Montauk Highway is a great example. Again, it's a two-lane highway. It has a lower volume of traffic, but it still has fast traffic. But you have several different crossings with crossing guards, which is great. You have pedestrian crossings, so it's a safer crossing. That's a great effort. I don't know how you could ever do that in Nichols Road. I really don't, other than an overhead bridge.
And when we talk about crossing guards, and we talk about, outside of bridges, but we talk about crossing guards and lights, that will protect children as far as making sure they don't do anything, that they're getting across during times when they should. But we forget, we live in the 21st century now. Distracted driving is a lot worse than it was 20 years ago. Like, people are rushing to work, texting, I'm late, and they're cruising up Nichols Road. You think they're going to stop at that light? That's my worst fear, and that's why I look at this and say, no kid should have to cross Nichols Road to get to school. They should at least be provided a choice, and the parents should be provided a choice. That's always where I stood. And the same goes true at Montauk Highway. I go to work, I drop my kids off in the morning at middle school, and Montauk Highway it's especially in the afternoon, it's crazy. So I think there was a part in the report that was interesting. We look at the 15-minute average, but to look at the amount of cars per 15 minutes from like 7 in the morning to like 9 in the morning and from like 2 o'clock to like 6 o'clock, you'll be overwhelmed. About 440 is the average. There's times where there's 500 plus cars, 600 cars in a 15-minute range going up and down Nichols Highway, with Nichols Road. And the same holds true for Montauk. It's a lot of very for the amount of busing we have and the range that we have, as far as, we offer we're probably the closest to state minimum of any other school in Long Island when we talk about what's offered. But we're in a pretty busy area when it comes to Montauk Highway and Nichols Road, and so just something to consider. Just surprised we've gotten this far into this world, 2021, where we're coming to this conclusion.
One thing of interest is in your Bayport Elementary School, the train is an overpass because the road is going underneath it. You have, I think, 4 or 5 other railroad crossings. That might be an expensive proposition, but it might be a long-term expensive solution to that problem, having underpasses under railroad crossings. And maybe something similar, either an underpass or an overpass on Nichols Road for children to do that. The amazing thing is I didn't see a whole lot of students crossing Nichols Road, but we did see students crossing Nichols Road. It's busier. The intersection that's busier is closer to the middle and the elementary school. I forget the name of the street. Pardon? Yes. The crossing guard there is amazing to watch her at work. It's like she's an air traffic controller trying to control people and cars going in different directions. Sylvan and Pyrrhic. Sylvan and Pyrrhic. It's a significant volume for the middle school, not significant for the elementary school. I don't know how. Walkers, yeah. There were some walkers with their parents, very close residents. Other people just took the bus. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you again very much. So what we're going to do now is, as we receive this information, Mr. Cordes is just going to give a very initial type of presentation. So when we originally talked about is we have not really looked at options or other ideas yet. Really, we wanted to take a look at this as, all right, based on the information that was presented to us from Eastern Suffolk BOCES, if we were to just to take it as face value, really looking at it, right, and not doing a deep dive into everything yet, and looking at all the ridership within ours, or possibly doing a survey of the community or any of that stuff. We just wanted to have an idea. So really tonight is just the beginning of a conversation when we're talking about the transportation and, you know, what we're thinking, especially as we enter into the next budget cycle. So again, this is very, very preliminary. It's really just to toss out an idea of, all right, if we were to take it straight on based off this, and we were to just add buses without really doing anything else, looking at, as I said, starting times or ridership or just any of those type of things. This is kind of what we just came up with. So it's not really a deep dive, but we just want to do a quick overview for you, and I just want to give it a little bit of context, and then we'll continue to do our homework as we're going forward. Okay? With that, thanks, Mr. Cordes, for coming, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to talk quickly about the possible, impacts that the district could have if we decide to do all busing in the district to resolve the child safety zone. We'll have an increase of students eligible for transportation, an increased number of buses that service the school district, and the increase of total cost of district transportation. So currently we have 274 students that are eligible to ride the school bus in the district. This equates to 3 66-passenger buses that service high school, middle school, and 3 elementary schools. That number does not reflect the actual ridership, which pre-COVID was 50% for the high school, 90% for the middle school, 90% for Academy Street, and just about 92% for Sylvan Avenue. So if we would decided that we were going to opt for transportation, all students within the district would be eligible for transportation. There'd be an additional 1,617 students that would be eligible for transportation, bringing the total number up to 1,891. And again, this is only students that attend in-district schools. Like I said previously, we have 3 buses currently. If we decided to do transportation for all, the number would increase by 11 buses, bringing the total to 14 school buses. This is worst case scenario. This is just going off the numbers in district. Okay. So to add the 11 buses, it would significantly impact the budget. Transportation would increase by $1,022,758, bringing the total for the big bus, the 66 passenger, to $1,301,692. This is based off current year cost. This will increase by CPI when it comes out, and we would be eligible for state aid. It's about 50%. But that takes about 2 years for the district to get that money. Okay. In a quick summary, all students in district would be eligible for transportation. The cost in transportation would increase by over $1 million. Okay. It's important to remember that the Board of Education has complete discretion on whether or not transportation will be provided. In addition, voter approval must be required on a separate proposition. Okay. Just initially, the next step for the district, the Board of Education must determine if they will accept the results, postpone their decision, or take no action in the child safety zone study. The district will explore less costly alternatives to the child safety zone study, additional crossing guards, possible trestles over the railroad crossings. The district also needs to consider the impact of implementing the changes for the 22-23 school year. And a separate referendum would need to take place in the voters' May of 2022. I included a map of the district to give you guys a kind of an idea of what's affected. So if you look at the top half, it's the beige color. So every student that's going to the high school would actually be in the child safety zone in that color. And for the middle school, you would have let's go with maroon and green. Going to the middle school would all be child safety zone. And then to the right side on the top would also be a child safety zone for middle school and elementary school.
Thank you, Mr. Cordes.
So just as a summary real quick, because I know people are going to look at this and say, okay, this is automatically what we're looking at. This is really, again, just the first look at this. As I said, we got a hold of the study, and then we just wanted to put some general things. Obviously, there are a lot of pros in terms of looking at the transportation, so that's something we'd want to look at. We'd also want to look at the various impacts it could possibly have. So we want to come up with a number of scenarios for you as well. So what we want to kind of give you is, looking at the safety zones is, okay, the way it's written right now, it looks like it would encompass all in-district students. And if you were to just to do that straight without anything else, if we're saying it's 11 additional buses, Mr. Cordes has started to look at some of the ridership. Obviously, it might be a little bit different because he's seeing right now the number of students that are riding at the high school level is a lot lower than the other schools, but these all would have to be taken into consideration. So this is really, just as I mentioned earlier, the beginning of a conversation. We were asked to put the study forward. We wanted to share that with you. And then we just wanted to kind of give you an idea on just some rough things that are out there. So that was really our goal for tonight. And again, thank you, Mr. Cordes.
Any trustees? Ms. Byrne?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cordes. So this isn't really for you. It's just a general thing to look into, which is, I think our enrollment continues declining, and I don't know if that number is based on the current enrollment. I don't know what kind of kindergarten's coming in next year. I just wonder if we could project that we would even need less buses as the years go by, at least for the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, I could probably answer some of that from what I know from doing the enrollment stuff. And as a matter of fact, that's a great question. And we are bringing back the enrollment committee just so we can have some of these discussions, so you know. As we had mentioned last year, we said we still had some work to do. I'll give you, for instance, last year we graduated 100 and, I'm close by 1 or 2, 186, 187 last year. This year's kindergarten class is 124. So it's almost a difference of about 60 students. We've been seeing that for a number of years. This year's was a little bit lower than I anticipated by about 10 students, I would say. But I would say our average class sizes right now are 130, 134, and that's the high school. We're still graduating. This year, again, we'll graduate between 180 and 190 again. So that theme will continue. For the first time, we are under 2,000 students now, and we're like 19 something. So I think we still have probably 4, maybe 5 to 6 years of where the numbers then will probably stabilize around that 130, 140 class size. Our smallest class right now is actually in 6th grade. They're at the 118 number. So that's the smallest. Most of the others are at 130, 135. Okay?
And then the other thing, if you could look into how many buses if we just had different start times. And so we use the same 6 buses instead of 14, and we just had them going around town. You might have to you might have to reconsider start times then. I'm not sure.
We've actually talked about that, and that's something we've started to take a look at. And again, we'll kind of do that with the enrollment group. Mr. Cordes will do that. And again, continuously taking a look at, how we were last in the past. We've also talked about how we're configured and all that. So we'll continue to do that and try to bring you some more information.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, so, Mr. Courts, I definitely thank you. You're doing a great job for us at the school. But I will say I'm not really a big fan of this at this time because I know we need a starting point, but we're putting out numbers that are completely unrealistic. That says that every single student would require busing. Even ones that live right next to the entrance of the school would require busing. I just don't see that scenario. And I know that the charge that we gave Dr. Harney is we need a starting point. And the starting point is every single student falls within a safety zone, which if we look at this and because we need time to work this, we need time to look at it and see what really constitutes and who really falls in these ranges, and also ridership. So I'm just a little concerned that somebody's going to get out there and do the reporting on the community sites, and it's going to be, look at this $1 million hit, and that's just not realistic. So very early, let's not go out there and start getting people all spooked. That's going to cost $1.3 million. There's a couple of factors here. One, that ridership is going to be much lower, and the amount of students that would fall into that, or possible courses of action to reduce some of the areas in risk. These are all things that need to be worked. That could be easily half. Number two, that dollar balance does not consider 50%, 48% state aid or reimbursement on busing. So even at its face value, it's not a $1 million increase, it's a $500,000 increase. These are all things that need to be considered before we start getting the discussions going on out and about. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with this. And I don't want to commingle, we kind of getting into that. Let's talk about getting kids to school safe. Then we can work on all the other things that we're trying to tie with that. This isn't about enrollment to me. This is not about the way we configure our schools. This is about getting kids to school safely. So if we start debating this versus that, we're really heading off in the wrong direction here. It's about getting kids to school safe. Because we want to avoid any chance of the worst possible thing happening. So let's just keep focused on that, and we'll continue to work to come up with the best solution for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Dr. Harney, would you be able to look into ridership?
Yeah, as I said, as we've started to do that, and obviously as the young, and we only, how we looked at it was obviously just pre-COVID, because obviously the ridership during COVID was less than normal. The question really would be is if we can figure out which, I don't want to say prioritize, as you're looking at the safety zones, right? You are correct. I mean, there are people who literally live right around the corner from the school, so I understand what you're saying, Mr. Johnson. But we can definitely take a look at the ridership. Obviously, the state allows us to do that when we're doing our calculations. The only things you have to just be, I'll always say this, just be careful of is you might get that day where everyone does want to ride the bus, so you have to be aware, just be aware of that. So you have to look at, you can't look at it as a one-day snapshot. We got to do more of averages and really kind of looking at it more from a larger picture as opposed to just doing a day or here. But yes, we will absolutely do that.
Mr. Borowski?
So, Dr. Harney, one of the things that I think I heard you mention was the potential for a community survey related to this.
Yeah.
Sitting here, looking at the presentations that were given, it's hard for me as a trustee to see something raised, as a child safety issue, whether our initial scope was just Nichols Road and it's expanded beyond that or not, and not want to address that, but obviously do it in the most reasonable way possible. As Mr. Johnson said, not everybody that's eligible is going to ride the bus, but I think that, polling the community may be the best way to get us the most accurate information to help us make that decision. Because, while there might be somebody now that's right around the corner from one of the schools that's eligible, and it may not, looking at it from a distance standpoint makes sense. It might work better for them from a work schedule standpoint for their children to ride the bus if it's available now. So, actually polling the community, I think, is probably going to be, not that anything's foolproof, but one of our more reliable sources of data, probably.
Thanks, Mr. Prasky. We can absolutely do a survey. I would like, and I'm all for it. I just think the one thing that we should just take a look at is, I'd like to dissect this report a little bit more, to kind of take a look at and say, okay, what does this safety zone really entail? And we kind of go through those a little bit more, and then we can kind of come back and say, okay, based on this, this is kind of what we're thinking, and then how about doing a survey off of whatever that is? That's kind of what I'd like to do. Okay? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? So Dr. Hardy, you think the board should consider voting on this at the next meeting, or we should hold off until the following meeting after that?
I think you should give us just a little bit of time. As I said, we've been going through this a little bit. And really, we're just mostly focusing on today is just to get the information out. So I'd like to have just a little bit more time on it.
All right, so maybe we can just get an update at the next meeting.
Yeah, I can give you that, and then I can tell you, hey, based on the information, as I said, first of all, I guess I have to make sure the information that is presented, and I've already done a preliminary, looks correct. And I think, as I said, I think Eastern Suffolk Post has done a tremendous job with that. And then from there, I can make a recommendation to you, at least, hey, I'm comfortable with the information, and then you can look to accept it if that's what you want to do. And then we can decide the next steps after that as well, if we're kind of doing this in steps. Okay?
Thank you so much, Dr. Hardy. Any other trustee questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate the presentation, guys. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items the board member would like removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Not hearing any. Can I have a motion to approve consent agenda items G, H, I, J, K, and L? Mr. Broski, second. Mr. Krug, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain from this.
Motion carries 6-0 with one abstention. Moving on to the regular agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the following BAC members for the 2021-2022 school year? Mr. Johnson? Second by Mr. Krug. Just a quick discussion. We have 8 members that have provided applications. And I just wanted to make sure everyone is agreeing to the charge for this year. If there's anything you'd like removed or added, please let us know. One charge will be advising on the creation of a new budget reporting product that will provide an informative and transparent decision supporting tool for the board and district voters, and to monitor and analyze current year budget execution monthly or quarterly, and make recommendations or communicate potential over-execution issues to the Board of Education. Is there any other items the board would like to charge the BAC with, or anything like to remove? Not hearing any. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the district-wide Project Save Committee listed in the agenda? Can I have a motion? I think it was Ms. Burns, second by Mr. Broski. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion to review the first reading of policy 8630, computer resources and data management? Mr. Krug, second. Ms. Byrne, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 6610.1, accounting? Ms. Burns, second. Mr. Johnson, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the first reading of policy 5290? This is the athletic placement policy. Mr. Broski, second. Mr. Johnson, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Can I have a motion to approve the second reading of policy 0105, diversity, equity, and inclusivity in education? Mr. Krug, second. Ms. Byrne, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. At this time, we would open it up to the community members for any new business you'd like to address the board with or the superintendent. Yep. We'll bring you the microphone, sorry. If you could just state your name and if you live in Bayport or Blue Point.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Stewart. I have 2 children that attend Academy Street Elementary School. I didn't actually prepare anything for tonight. I was hoping that someone here tonight was going to touch upon this. If you could just make me, the audience, and people at home aware of the policy regarding teachers or staff, rather, in the district with social media posting in the school, on school grounds, inappropriate posts, and or regarding talking about the students in a manner that's not appropriate.
I mean, what I can say, the Board of Education is aware of the recent situation involving a staff member in the social media posting. Please know that we are aware, but unable to comment on personnel issues while in public. We can get you a copy of the accessible user computer usage network. We can get you that policy. But as far as the staff member you're discussing, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to talk about that.
If there is something specific that you wanted to share with us, we could kind of do that, not in this public forum, but we'd be
Okay.
more than happy to. I've had a number of people reach out that I've reached out to, or I've had somebody from my office, so we'd be more than willing to. But this just isn't the forum. We cannot talk about personnel issues in public.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other community members? Any new or old business? Any trustees with any new business? Not hearing any, can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Johnson, second. Mr. Krug, all in favor? Thank you guys so much for attending the board meeting tonight. We appreciate your time, as always.